my name is Lisa Welsh. I am with Geosyntec Consultants. I've been with Geosyntec for about 8 years, based in Oakland in our surface water resources group. And I've been a consultant to the Contra Costa Clean Water Program for about 4 years, working directly with their monitoring committee. That I work a lot with Beth in particular. And we work to implement the stormwater permit for the municipalities in Contra Costa County. And in particular, I focus a lot on monitoring and also help with implementation of treatment controls as well as source controls for legacy pollutants like PCBs and mercury. But this presentation today, and as the topic for today is about trash monitoring, I'll focus on the related efforts that the municipalities and the program countywide are doing in support of requirements on trash outfall and in-stream monitoring. So this is a program that just got underway with the reissuance of the third round of the municipal stormwater permit, which came into effect July 1, 2022. So I will just go ahead and launch right in. So this is an image from courtesy of the Santa Clara Valley Urban Runoff Pollution Prevention Program, but I think it really encompasses a lot of what we do and what our aims and goals are. So trash, as you all are very familiar with through your creek cleanups, it pollutes our waterways and the landscapes. And there are a variety of different sources and pathways for trash to get into, whether it's the urban land environment as well as the creeks. And we are all implementing in the municipalities a variety of control and treatment measures to try to minimize the amount of trash that gets into the creeks. And so what this presentation is about and what the permit requirement is getting towards is wanting to better understand the effectiveness of those source control and treatment measures by monitoring and through monitoring. And we're doing and required to monitor two ways. One are outfalls. I can, let's see if you can see maybe a white arrow. So these are just these are the stormwater outfalls. So the discharge points from, say, catch basins in the roadway that eventually discharge out to creeks. We have to monitor at the end of those outfalls, as well as direct in-stream monitoring. So the Municipal Regional Stormwater Permit, or the MRP, the need and their desire to regulate trash goes back almost a decade. In 2014, the municipalities are required to submit the long-term trash reduction plans. And these plans really established a baseline for trash in these 4 distinct categories: low, moderate, high, and very high. And they had maps throughout their whole jurisdictions, so throughout the county. And I'll point out here that low doesn't mean zero trash, but it's actually a metric of 0 to 5 gallons per acre per year. And we don't need to care too much about the units, but I think it's important to understand that low doesn't mean zero in this case. And now by next June, the end of June 30th, 2025, the municipalities are required through the permit to implement 100% load reduction from baseline. So they're needing to treat all of the moderate, high, and very high areas down to this low metric. And in Contra Costa County, that encompasses about 24% of the urban area, or about 70 square miles. That area is about 1.5 times the size of the city of San Francisco. So it's a lot of treatment. So I just want to give you some examples for what these types of treatment control measures are. And I guess I should say, you can, if you have an urgent question, feel free to interrupt me and I'll try to monitor the chat. But if not, just maybe jot down the slide number and we can come back to questions at the end of the presentation. So I'll just go through some of the more common examples of these trash treatment controls. And I'll start with just 2 smaller controls that go inside catch basins. And so they're treating just the area that drains into that catch basin, say from the right of way. So this is what's called a connector pipe screen. So hopefully you can kind of see how there's this mesh screen that can go around the inlet. So both a vertical screen, and it's about 5 millimeters The mesh is about 5 millimeters, which is actually the requirement in the regulations. More or less the size, I think, of like a cigarette butt. We want to make sure to be able catching those so that they're not discharging to the creeks. And so there's a vertical screen preventing trash from flowing in line down the storm drain pipe, and then as well as a horizontal one. So trying to prevent trash from kind of getting in that area when if it is able to get through the screen from the surface. Another common example of an inlet-based device. This is just a catch basin insert. So here you can see here that flow might come over the grate from the catch basin, and then it kind of gets caught in almost like a basket. But there's still space and ability for water to overflow and to flow through this 5 millimeter mesh screen, but that the trash is captured in this kind of basket. And I'll also have some pictures of these out in the field as well later in the presentation. Now, this is an example of a much bigger unit. It can treat up to tens of acres, whereas the other ones are maybe less than 10 acres or so. And this is called a hydrodynamic separator. These are pictures I pulled right out of Contact, one of the vendors. So I just want to give credit to them. But these, you can see what the trash can come in either from the top or from the sides from the pipes in line. And there's the blue, the picture shown, the component shown in blue actually kind of spins around and it collects some of the trash in the middle while the water is able to flow through and out and continue down gradient through the pipe system. And this is just a picture in the field, just wanting to show that these are can be really big units and they can treat a large area. So some examples of these, I showed just a few examples of some more common trash capture devices, but the municipalities can also implement other actions and get credit as well for controlling areas that aren't low down to low. Some of these other actions might be enhanced street sweeping, improved trash bin management, anti-littering enforcement. There's a variety of other control measures as well. So there are two main questions that are in the permit that the monitoring is aimed to address. The technical language is in the gray text on the left, and then sort of my interpretation and what we're really trying to get at is just on the right. So the two main questions are, one, are the devices and other actions effective? Are they right now, the municipalities do get credit, and it is written in that if they put in these devices, if they meet the specifications, that they are indeed controlled to low. So the water board wants to be monitoring this and see the effectiveness of these devices. And the next question is low really low enough? So we have this metric for what defines low, and they are asking if we're making sure that there's no adverse impacts to the receiving waters if these controls are implemented and in place. Okay, so how do we go about and do that? So what are we monitoring, and what are the municipalities and that region-wide are we required to do? So these are, regionally, there are 11 outfalls that we're required to monitor. 2 of those locations are in Contra Costa County, and those are at the stormwater outfalls. For the in-stream monitoring, there's 6 locations that are required to do regionally, and 1 of those is in Contra Costa County. For each of these different types of monitoring, we have to do 3 per site per year. And the permit also prescribes the methods, which I'll show some examples of later. As I mentioned, the permit came into effect July 2022. So we had at first 1 year to prepare for the outfall monitoring. And then we were required to start implementing that monitoring plan. And then had 1 additional year to prepare for the in-stream monitoring. And then we will actually be starting that monitoring, required to do both this coming October. And really, actually, both of these are I think they're essentially almost the first time that this type of monitoring has ever been done. So there was a lot of work that went into it to prepare. This is just just showing the cover of the regional trash outfall monitoring plan. And this was also done through regional collaborations, but also with the input of a TAG, a technical advisory group. There are 4 outside technical advisors and 1 regulator that's required to be on the TAG. And I also just want to point out too that this we have annual reporting for all of actually creek status monitoring that's due March 31st annually. So I'll be presenting some of the preliminary results today, but actually we haven't formally written up the monitoring report yet for outfall monitoring, but we're just starting to work on that, and that will be submitted in March of 2025. Okay, so now we get to some more of the pictures and what this looks like. So this a little bit kind of too much text on here, but just wanted to point out that trying to find an outfall was not an easy process. And while there are hundreds of outfalls countywide, all of the programs actually had a very challenging time in identifying ones that were feasible for monitoring. That we could barely identify the 2 or 3 that were required in each county. Some of the things that we considered, certainly first and foremost, were safety, wanting to avoid encampment areas and areas that were subject to flooding. They needed to be accessible, allow for the installation of these netting devices, which is what we're using to collect and monitor the trash, and also be able to just support this net. So I think this will become more clear as I share some more pictures. So this is a picture of what's called, I didn't show this earlier, but this large trash capture device. This type is called a gross solids removal device, or a gizzard. Actually, Caltrans also uses these, I think, fairly commonly. And this is one that at first we thought, could be a potential monitoring location, but we can't use the device itself to monitor because we need to see how effective the devices are. And so this was then also not a feasible location to go further downstream. But I think it's a really good picture of a gizzard and what these types of trash control devices are out there. This is another picture of an outfall in Clayton. Again, these are ones we thought maybe could be feasible in desktop, but going out into the field, they aren't. This one, the net, which we would be installing at the end of the device, would just be sitting in the creek, and that's not what we're looking for. This is one in Contra Costa, an unincorporated county in Pacheco. And at first we thought this one was also not feasible, although we have ended up using it in the end with some modifications. But it discharged into this riprap swale, and it didn't look like it could be flush. And the pipe is a corrugated metal pipe, so the device couldn't be mounted securely on it directly. There's a lot of outfalls with flap gates, also not feasible to attach a net and do the monitoring. And we need to have one where the net can land safely. So this one, City of Lafayette, a vertical channel wall, that doesn't work. But eventually we did find our 2, and we had to go through all of the permitting as well that is needed to install these devices. We worked closely with Department of Fish and Wildlife, checked permits if we needed with the Army Corps of Engineer. We filed a CEQA exemption form, but also had to check that box, and then certainly get local access permits. Okay, so what are the locations that we did end up monitoring, that we are monitoring in Contra Costa County? So one of those we identified is in Civic Park at Walnut Creek, and along Walnut Creek. The catchment area is pretty much the parking lot at Civic Park, and which drains out to the Orange Star, and you see a picture of the outfall just from above. So we're high up on the creek, but there's also a landing space for the net to go down. And this is just looking up gradient. It's a small, I think 15 or 18 inch concrete pipe. And this is what the device looks on at the end of the outfall. And so we put the whole mount is there now, but we only put the net on before an anticipated monitoring event, because we don't want it to get tampered or entrapment of animals that are along the creek. And this is the second outfall along Grayson Creek at Center Ave in unincorporated county. And this one the Civic Park one drains just one inlet. And this one is a series of 4 or 5 inlets. So the catchment area is a little bit larger than the Civic Park one. So this Grayson Creek one, as I mentioned, required a little bit more work to get prepared to be able to put the device at the end of the outfall location. But the county is just an incredible partner, and we worked with Beth and her colleagues and the county's on-call contractors to make some modifications just to the outfall so that we could securely put on the device. So we actually had to get some concrete poured so that we could put on, have a flat surface for which to install the net. And this is what it looks like in the end when all things are set up. We're a little bit worried about the potential for tampering, or it looked like there's someone that was living temporarily under the bridge. There was a little bit of trash, maybe a small fire that was in the device, but we make sure to clear it out before we install the net. And actually we had no issues the first year. So that was really good. And then these are just some of the results actually from the first year of monitoring this past water year. In Walnut Creek, you can see a picture. This is of the device. This is one of those, the second picture of the small inlet-based devices. So the filter can kind of just see through this the curb. And we actually only collected leaf litter in this location. And there is no trash that was collected through any of the events. So that was great. We did find some trash in the other site location, but by and large, it was not a significant amount of trash. And this is just an example of one of the inlets looking through where we can see that connector pipe screen, the vertical connector pipe screen. So then after we collect the trash in each of these 3 events, then there's a team that works to do categorization of the trash, because we are interested not only in the volume of trash that's being collected, but the types of trash that are coming through. And these are the different types of categories that are identified and tracked for each event. So looking at single-use plastic bags, polystyrene foam, smoking products, other plastics that might not be kind of identifiable and fall neatly into one of the other categories. Looking at organic, paper, fab category in general, and biohazard as well. And as I mentioned, we have some preliminary results that look like that these devices are being controlled, are effective in controlling trash to this low generation rate level, but that we are working up those results right now and will be submitted in a monitoring report at the end of March. So the other component we're required to do this outfall monitoring, but also the in-stream monitoring. And this all combined is very expensive. So the regional programs gathered together and they submitted a grant to EPA under the Water Quality Improvement Fund grant. And the programs collectively received $3.5 million to help and support this. So the 3.5 is largely going directly, will fund the in-stream monitoring, and the programs are required to collectively support with an equal amount of match dollars, and that's primarily coming through the outfall portion of the monitoring. So now this is the technique that's going to be used for the in-stream monitoring, which is to drop this weighted box trawl with a net from a bridge, or to lower it, not drop it in, but to lower it with a crane from a bridge, and collect discrete samples over the hydrograph. So both during a storm event, so when at the beginning and later and tailing end of the storm event. And this in-stream monitoring, this portion is just looking, if you were looking on top from the bridge, just lowering the net into the creek so that the trash would be coming down and catching into the net. And the plan is to do this at discrete intervals if the creek is high enough, both at different depths and I think across the creek as well. But the approach overall is to have these discrete samples collected over the hydrograph. So the location that was selected, the one that's required in Contra Costa County, is in Rodeo. So Rodeo Creek and at Hawthorne Drive. And this is a picture of the bridge for which they'll be lowering this weighted box trawl over. And the watershed as these are in-stream and creek locations, is quite large, but this is an area that does have some trash treatment controls as well. So the upcoming plans, as I mentioned, are to continue this outfall and monitoring this upcoming water year, to begin the in-stream monitoring as well. And then we are actively working on data analysis and reporting to get ready to submit that report on trash monitoring at the end of March 2025. And because of some of the challenges that were involved in selecting outfall locations in particular, the Water Board requested that the programs conduct some research on potential alternative methods for outfall monitoring that might allow and permit some safe and effective monitoring, but in more locations. So we're also looking into alternative ways to do it. Could include video, or it could include some other maybe techniques as well, looking at that outfall component. And then I just wanted to give a thank you and shout out. There's a variety of different people that are involved in this effort, from consultant teams to all of the clean water programs throughout the Bay, and those that permitting agencies as well. So this is really a collective and a big effort region-wide. And I apologize, I did not manage the chat. So if there are questions that have come through yet, I missed them, but I can look.
No, it's all good. We can do that when you're, are you all
this is it
finished?
Yep.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. This is amazing information. I had never seen a lot of those graphics that you shared, which were really helpful. We had one question or suggestion coming in from Barry that says, can you use data collected by citizens working with the Clean Swell Monitoring mobile app? Could result in a larger sampling area.
Yeah, so I think that the plan initially for where citizens could be involved was potentially helping with the trash categorization. And that was written in, might have been a part of the grant as well. They wanted, I think I know, just this first year to kind of get some training in their hands, just and direct experience and just with how they would do this trash categorization, because they did actually end up changing some of the categories based on the results. But I think there was potentially ultimately a plan because citizen monitoring and involvement in this trash is so visible that really, I think, is a goal. And then there's the other way, I think at the end of the grant, there's going to be, I think, a forum to present and share some of the results with the public. But actually, maybe not to call you out, Beth, but you might remember too if there's another community part about it. But I'm not. I can look into the Clean Swell Monitoring mobile app.
Yeah, I'm with you. I just remember we're going to have a sort of like a trash summit near the end. That should be interesting, and yeah, and then the community events where they can do the trash characterization, like you said. That's all I remember.
And will that trash summit be open to the public, or is it really just for agencies?
I think it will be open to the public.
Okay.
That's what I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, great. Hopefully, Beth, you can let us know when that will be, because I think there will be some people here and others that will be interested to attend. And on that note, let's see, on slide 18, you mentioned the monitoring report that's being worked on. Where can folks access that monitoring report in March?
Yeah, great question. Oh, did it just freeze?
Nope, you're good.
Okay, you're back. Okay, yeah, so it will be posted on the Clean Water Program's website. We usually it is submitted to the Water Board in March, and at that point it's publicly available too. And we should have it, posted within a few weeks thereafter. And I can add, let me add a link to the chat too for where
yeah, that would be wonderful. Yeah, because then I can also share it with the forum email list.
Absolutely.
So I have a couple of other questions, but I want to open the floor to folks who might have questions for Lisa, with the other Lisa. Questions, comments? You can either just unmute or put your question in the chat or whatever you're most comfortable with. Okay, question about I guess I'll go. The in-stream monitoring. I hadn't heard about that, so I was pleased to hear about that. Is that intended to sample for windblown trash and direct discharge?
Well, I think it will end up sampling for windblown trash because it's anything that would get into the creeks. Initially, I mean, I think what the Water Board had wanted was also to be able to co-locate. locations that ideally were right adjacent and even downstream of the outfall, so that we could have that comparison about what's, we would know what's coming out from the MS4, from the storm drains, and then any additional that would be coming in, say from like windblown materials. Just because of how hard it is to find those co-locations. In most cases, that was not feasible. But yeah, anything that would be coming into the creek through other means, aside from the outfalls, would be monitored through this in-stream effort.
That's great to know, because anyone who's done a cleanup or worked in this field knows that there's plenty of trash that gets into the creeks outside of the storm drains. So
absolutely.
So that's really great to know. Can you clarify, is the Rodeo Creek location the only location where they're doing the in-stream here in Contra Costa?
That's correct.
Okay,
yep.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a very small sample size, but I mean, it's better than nothing.
Yeah.
But yeah, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and some of the locations were also selected because they wanted minimal impacts from encampments right along the creek, because that is not, that's just definitely less of an extent of what the goal of the monitoring would be. So, but looking for other ways that the trash would be getting into the creeks.
That's interesting. I think, so yeah, please, Beth.
I was going to say, I think it was also challenging, as it was with the outfall location, to find a receiving water location, because there has to be a bridge, and it has to be a special type of bridge in order to lower the trawl from. And yeah, so there was a lot of parameters in order to get what you really want to try to measure. So it makes it really hard to find locations.
Got it. How long does it stay in the creek?
I can't remember the exact time, but they'll be out there manually. They'll be lowering the trawl off of a crane. So I can't remember how long, but I think it's like 30 minutes, or when it would get full, and then they would be lifting it back up to go over it. But I don't think it's certainly not out there for days.
Yeah, they don't leave it out there.
Hours. Okay. Right. They don't leave it out there, and they're out there the whole time. And I think they'll incorporate video monitoring as well.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah. That's helpful.
Lisa?
Yeah, Barry, please go ahead.
Could I just mention, I'm thinking of trash capture devices, and I actually, in the city of Brentwood, when I worked for the Parks Department, we installed a rather large one that is trash truck accessible. I believe they winch it up once a year and clean it out. I don't know when that is, but I'm just wondering, could that be included in one of the monitoring sites? I don't know if it's on anybody's radar, if anybody contacted the city of Brentwood.
Yeah, we didn't look, that's not one of the locations that, we did select, obviously, but I think that that is one way that a lot of, I think, trash, the effectiveness data has been assessed so far, is maybe through some of these cleanups, because all of the devices really should be cleaned up every year, especially before the start of the wet season. But they're looking to see what passes through. The water board wants to see what gets through the devices down gradient, and not what's in the devices. So that's one of the differences in this study versus what's been done previously. And
it sounded like you were limited to the unincorporated areas anyway, right?
Because actually we could go anywhere, but
any of the permittees.
Any of the permittees.
Okay.
It does happen that, one of the outfall, and then the single in-stream one is in the county. The county is a really great partner. So some of these other municipalities were less willing to have someone drop a trawl from a bridge, and the county, there's a variety of different constraints that went in, and that was one of the factors as well, especially for the in-stream. But the county is a really good and willing partner.
Understood. Yeah, that's helpful to know. I had a question about the trash collection data form that you showed on slide 17. I hadn't seen that before. Where is that actually from, or was that created specifically for this project?
It was created specifically from this project, but I understand based on previous efforts and like tracking California's trash, I think it was largely, based off of that report. So I can also, So the form would also be included in the trash monitoring plan, which was just resubmitted to the water board at the end of July. And so I am working actively on monitoring, on updates. And so that is one of the things that I just have to post onto the website too, but the trash monitoring plan, you could find it in there, and it would be available through there.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, because we've been using a different form, as Beth knows, for trash assessments and now what we call MRP3 cleanups. But I think that it might be a good idea to try to get apples to apples kind of information across the board. So it's, potentially that could be a good one to use at our cleanups as well, because that's the data that we report back to the county. But yeah, does anyone else have any questions or comments for Lisa? Okay. Oh, Igor.
Hi. Some time ago, there was quite a bit of action having to do with what was going to happen with giving cities credit for doing creek cleanups. And at the time, I think they were going to not allow credit for creek cleanups because they were going to be installing these interceptors all over the place. And so that would take care of both the prevention of debris getting into the creek and also monitoring. How does what we're talking about here connect with that, or does it in any way?
That's a great question. I am less knowledgeable directly about the C10 or the trash control requirements, but Beth, not to punt it over to you, but you might be best to answer that
So there's a couple different things going on. I don't think they're directly related. With the creek cleanups, the water board is giving credit for us for the volume of trash collected, but they're taking away that at the end, right before the 100%. And so I think the credit was put in there to help permittees move along to increase their percent trash reduction. But eventually they really want it to be all preventative, because their idea is that if the trash is already in the creek, it's already done a lot of damage. So the idea is to do all these controls and try to get to the trash before it gets into the creek. And then they want to make sure that that is still effective. That being said, for the creek cleanups, they are still a great way for outreach, and they help permittees meet the C7 requirements for community outreach. So, we can continue in that capacity. But yeah, they will be phased out for credit under the C10, the trash load reduction requirements.
We're doing all these creek cleanups right now, and during Coastal Cleanup Month, I guess. And I guess, are the municipalities getting any credit for what's being accomplished during this time?
Yes, we have both the RCD and then also the watershed project. They do creek cleanups. In MRP3, they're required to go to the same location twice in order to get that credit. But we get the numbers twice a year. So we get the volume of trash collected, and then we that translates into a certain percent reduction. So we are counting that right now. It's just, unfortunately, they're getting rid of that like in 2025.
Yeah, so right now they're still getting some credit, but that will be phased out soon, which is unfortunate. But as Beth mentioned, creek cleanups are a really important educational and outreach tool. So we hope to continue using them in that sense. So, okay. Anyone else? Thank you for your question, Igor. Well, thank you so much, Lisa. You're welcome to stick around, or if you need to hop off, that's fine too. We really appreciate your presentation. Yeah. And then, yeah, absolutely. So our next speaker is Jennifer Dougherty from the San Francisco Estuary Institute. And I can, you should be able to share your screen and unmute, whatever you prefer.
There we go. Sorry. I'm a little out of practice at Zoom. So we use Google Meet. So it's just slightly different. Sorry for not arriving earlier and disrupting your schedule. That wasn't my intention.
Not a problem. Thank you so much for being here.
Of course, it's my pleasure. I'm just gonna take a second to reorganize my space here. Everybody can see my screen, I hope. Let's see. All right. Great. All right. So good morning. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share about the adventures of tracking trash in the Walnut Creek watershed. As Lisa mentioned, I'm Jennifer Dougherty from SFEI. And this is research, not garbage. Perhaps some of you have actually seen these bottles in your local creeks. I know that they've been out since the end of February. So it's possible that they've been seen. I actually, when we were out trying to recover some, I met a variety of unhoused folks who were quite familiar with the bottles. And so I know that they've been seen at least. So why track trash? So the end of 2017, a paper came out showing that rivers were transporting a huge plastic trash load. As you can see on the right, the green circles are Asian rivers, and the lavender are African rivers. And then the blue is all remaining rivers. So what they did was they took the river discharges and modeled how much would be released into the ocean using plastic concentrations. So they modeled this. And so this, they were able to demonstrate it's clearly a huge problem. And it opened the door to try and understand the movement of trash in waterways. So this infographic was prepared by the Santa Clara Valley Urban Runoff Pollution Prevention Program. And I thought it'd be a good way to show how this project is related. As Lisa was just talking about these trash control measures, those are, and what you are all going to have to do with your 100%, I don't know if it was 100 or 0, but the control measures. So most of what is covered is control items. This particular study is actually just skips past all of those control measures and looks at how trash moves once it's actually in the waterways. So I wanted to acknowledge our behind the scenes collaborators at the City of Concord and the City of Walnut Creek that made permitting easy and therefore this whole project possible. It can be very challenging to get permits to do things like dropping plastic into rivers. And so we really appreciated that. And then also the project staff at SFEI, Alicia Gilbreth, Kaylee Patterson, and Jonah Breer. So this is phase 2 of an ocean conservancy project. And that Clean Swell app that you all were talking about for cleanup, that's an ocean conservancy app that we also used. In this image, you can see there's kind of a lot of trash surrounding me, and we used the app to log when we were deploying any kind of trash that we were picking up at the same time. And I will say, I think that Lisa's form was a better way to do it. It was a little clunky to try and fit some of the items into what was on the app, but that's just an aside. So as the second phase, this had 4 deployment sites across the United States. So the LA River, the Miami River, and the Anacostia River. And then for our part in the Bay, we chose Walnut Creek because it's the largest undammed watershed. It had a variety of land uses. In the Bay, it has an average runoff of 40 million cubic meters per year. Plus, it's relatively close to SFEI, so it made it pretty convenient to be able to move to the sites. So we were asked to deploy and retrieve 44 GPS tagged bottles, and they would be deployed for up to 9 months. So that was phase 2 of this project, and that occurred, like I said, across those 4 rivers. In phase 1, the deployments occurred in August of 2022 and lasted just 90 days. So the idea was to be able to cover short and long-term movement patterns to see if that would be useful in determining how this trash or plastic litter is moving in waterways. So in phase 1, there were 3 sites, the Don River of Toronto, the North Chicago River, and the Ipswich River in Massachusetts. So in both phases, GPS bottles were tossed in rivers and locations are transmitted via satellite to servers with pings every 4 hours. And then University of New Hampshire is processing the travel pass. And these tracked floatables are able to reveal movement patterns and accumulation zones. So the goals of this project are to investigate the pathways of floating plastic litter in waterways and develop a model to predict and understand the transport of plastics. Based on what I showed you in that slide a few slides ago, you can see that there is a need to understand what's happening as opposed to just using the amount of plastic and then discharge to quantify how much is actually ending up in the ocean. So with that, I'll jump into what we did and where we did it, and some imaging. So we deployed at 5 sites for this study. Originally, we had 4 sites. Walnut Creek at Diamond Boulevard. Can you see my cursor when I'm on the screen? Yeah, okay, great. Yes. So Walnut Creek at Diamond Boulevard, Walnut Creek at Ignacio Valley Boulevard, Tice Creek at Rossmore Parkway, and Grass Valley Creek at Diablo Road. Those are the 4 original sites that we had selected. And then following the first storm, we realized that we needed to move the recovered bottles to a slower system and added Galindo Creek at Treat Boulevard as another spot to deploy bottles at. And I'm going to walk you through the paths of a variety of bottles deployed from each of these sites, so you can see kind of what happened. So here are some photos of the sites where we deployed. So Walnut Creek at Ignacio Boulevard is distinct because of the rectangular concrete channel. And then downstream at Diamond Boulevard, it's a wide, more natural channel, both of which are considerably different from the 3 remaining sites, all of which are smaller tributaries. So the stream gauge data that I'm going to show you is located on Walnut Creek at Ignacio Valley Boulevard. So this shows you the stage for Walnut Creek at Ignacio Valley Boulevard between February 29th and March 4th. That particular time frame is because we deployed originally on February 29th, and then we had to do a retrieval on March 4th for some bottles that were trying to make a very grand escape to the bay. So this was the largest event that was recorded during the project deployment. So the stage reached 2.73 feet at 1 a.m. on March 2nd. and then dropped to about 1.15 feet by 7:30 in the morning on March 4th, when Alicia and I were in a kayak attempting to retrieve the bottles that were on a quick path to the bay. So the next slides I'll show you are the path of a variety of the bottles. One of them was our only known escapee, the elephant seal, which is sunning itself on Ryer Island. And then some others that were escaped, but not via water, and likely with people involved. So this is the path of our only known escapee, the elephant seal. We deployed here at Walnut Creek at Diamond Boulevard at 9:20 a.m. on February 29th. And the bottle arrived to Ryer Island on March 3rd, somewhere between 3 a.m. and 6:47, or 3 and 7 a.m. And it covered a distance of 12.1 miles in roughly 72 hours. So this is the only known bottle that has traveled this distance. Oops, sorry, didn't mean to do that. Sorry about that. That's traveled this distance. And so it was already here near the edge of the bay by the 1st of, actually, sorry, the 2nd of March. And then it took a little bit longer for it to actually reach Ryer Island. So here's the path of Aurora rockfish. We deployed Aurora rockfish. By the way, the bottles were all named. So the names were tagged on the bottles so that in our tracking, we would know which bottle was where. So we deployed from Walnut Creek at Ignacio Valley Boulevard at 10:20 a.m. on February 29th and recovered this bottle 6.9 miles downstream on March 4th near Marsh Drive. And then this bottle got to get a second try where we redeployed it on Galindo Creek on March 25th. Here is the path of Eagle Ray. The bottle left the creek on May 28th and reached the final destination on July 5th over here. And the last ping happened on July 6th around noon. So Eagle Ray was aided by humans and machines to accomplish this 4.3 mile transit. And actually, Galindo Creek itself, some of the bottles, I'll show you another one that actually traveled down the creek, but looking at the track, it looked like there was often interaction with humans to move the bottles in and out of the creek itself. So this 4.3 mile transit was definitely not water-based and not one that would be usual for this particular modeling purpose, but I thought it might be interesting to notice where things are ending up. So here is a path of blue mussels. We deployed this one again from Walnut Creek at Diamond Boulevard at 9:20 a.m. On February 29th. And the main traverse of the bottle occurred between March 1st at 23:03. It was here, almost at the point of deployment. And then on March 2nd at 3:02 a.m., it reached this point here. So it covered the majority of that distance within a 4-hour window. And again, I'll just point out that that stage graph that I showed you, the peak point was during this time. So it makes sense that we would have the largest movement. And then the remainder of the distance that it covered, so the total was 4.2 miles. In the next 2 days, it made this the rest of that distance. So I wanted to point out that the majority, like I said, was covered in that 4-hour window. So now here's one of the smaller tributaries. This is Tice Creek, where we see the path of shrimp, which only moved 0.6 miles during the deployment, which lasted until August 7th. So though it reached the end of its course by May 10th. So we deployed right here at Rossmore Parkway. It made it, this is an estimation of the creek as it goes underground underneath this particular road intersection. And I didn't have any pings on the bottle during that time, so I couldn't exactly coordinate where it was. But yes, so the shrimp reached this point by May 10th, but it stayed basically in that vicinity, moving only a little bit back and forth up until August 7th when we recovered it. So the difference in movement between the lower reaches and the tributaries is pretty significant in what was possible. And then here, this is, again, another tributary. This is Grass Valley Creek, where Angelfish was the bottle with the longest transit of 0.2 miles, and did so in the same peak storm that I showed you earlier. So nearly the entire 0.2 miles occurred in 4 hours between March 1st around 1852 and ended at 2256, so right here. And I will say that the Grass Valley Creek, we have been unsuccessful in finding any of the bottles because it's so densely covered with reeds, which I'll show you in an image in a little bit. But so Angelfish is still somewhere around here. But yeah, so a very short transit, but all also in a very short window of time. And then the last of the smaller tributaries, Galindo Creek, where the longest transit was 0.1 miles, though human involvement or extracurricular adventures can't be ruled out for this movement. So the black gill rockfish was deployed on March 25th at 11:35 a.m. and retrieved on August 7th at 14:35. When I was making the path, I removed all of the extracurricular movements and just stayed within what could be considered the path through water. And so to summarize, we deployed 22 bottles on Walnut Creek, 11 from Diamond Boulevard and 11 from Ignacio Valley Boulevard. Of those, 4 have stopped pinging and 1 never started. So what happened to those and their whereabouts are completely unknown. 1 of them made their way out to the bay and is occupying Ryer Island. 3 are actively pinging and will hopefully be recovered. The remaining 13 bottles were retrieved and redeployed on Galindo Creek. Of those, 10 were recovered and 3 were lost. Eagle Ray is one of those that I showed you that was lost to some land environment. And then of the 11 bottles deployed on Tice Creek, we've retrieved 10 and are still hoping to find the last one, although we spent about 2 hours walking in circles near the pinging bottle that we were never able to recover. As far as the 11 deployed on Grass Valley Creek, 2 bottles never showed up on the GPS. So those and the actively pinging 9 are lost in this very dense foliage. And then for the next steps for this project are mostly in the hands of UNH. Though we're hoping to recover as many bottles as possible. We have reached out to organizations to hopefully help us in recovery efforts, perhaps some of those cleanup efforts that are happening. And then this map shows the location of the phase 2 deployments. Here we are in the Bay. The LA River, you can see there was one bottle trying to make its way to Mexico. And then the Miami River bottles, as well as the Anacostia. And with that, I will leave you with the most unusual observation while in the field for this project. This was taken while kayaking on Walnut Creek, trying to recover bottles in the lower reaches. Yes, that is a horse, a real horse that is living with an unhoused person underneath this bridge. So, but the horse, that was something I had never seen before.
Wow, you never know what you're going to find in a creek, right? Yes,
that is true.
Well, thank you so much. This is amazing, amazing information. It's kind of actually shocking to see the paths, I think. So I'm going to open it to questions, but first I see that Dick had in the chat that he was wondering why the study only covered 9 months, and which 9 months did that include rainy months or only dry months?
Thank you for the question. Actually, a great question. The 9 months is based on the battery life of the GPS units. So that's the most time that they will potentially live, basically. And then the coverage, well, you saw that the bottles were deployed in 4 different locations in the United States. So there was definitely rainy periods covered in all areas. The bottles we didn't deploy until kind of later in our season, and I believe that had to do with getting permitting in place. It took a little bit longer, I think. But yeah, so we did have rainy season, dry season, and then the East Coast environment is of course a different. They don't have the Mediterranean climate and the dry summers that we do, so they've had movement during what we would consider our dry time. So,
got it. So at this point, I think we'll open it to questions or comments for Jennifer. Let's see. So you can raise your hand or just unmute yourself, and you can go from there. Well, while we're waiting for folks, I will ask if somebody here or somebody we know finds one of these bottles. It sounds like you're now trying to collect all of them. What protocol would you like them to follow? Do you want them to just report where they see it, or do you want them to grab it and tell you, or
it would be great if people found them, if they grab them, and then I will come and pick them up from you. You don't have to do anything more than that. So, and to highlight where they are, the majority are on, okay, so it's actually Green Valley Creek, not Green Valley. Let's see. There's only one left on Tice Creek. Let's see. All of the 11 that were deployed at Grass Valley Creek are there. It's somewhere between Diablo Road and the end point, which I'll show you in a minute. And then
those are the ones in the vegetation, right?
Yeah, in the vegetation. And then 3 bottles between Ignacio Valley Boulevard and Marsh Drive-ish. There are 3, I believe. So But yeah, and if the bottles that have stopped pinging or never started, those could also be in those locations down. The hardest place to recover was in the reaches below Diamond. There's a large amount of trash that's kind of caught up in those areas. I'm sure you're
below below drop structure 1.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that is really interesting, and I think it's very possible that somebody on this call or somebody watching the recording will find one of these, because we're all often in these areas. So it's really good to know.
And they look just like this. So they are a blender bottle. The green gets pretty gross. It can be pretty brown by the time they're recovered, so they may not look as bright and shiny as these do. But they all have this is research, not garbage, on them. And then, of course, because it says not to remove before October, that could be a reason why people haven't collected them before, but we are actually actively trying to recover them.
Right, and that's because they're running low on their batteries, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Got it. All right. Does anyone else have questions for Jennifer?
Yeah, Jennifer, is there going to be like a next phase? I mean, like a phase 3 or?
Well, so the plan is we're going to be working on a manuscript to write up the results from phase 1 and 2. I imagine that there could be a phase 3. I am not in part of that planning process, but there are some things that have come up. For example, the modeling is only looking at downstream movement because they were trying to eliminate any kind of tidal impact to make their modeling easier. But I think that's an important piece that would be important to nail down as well. So I can see that there's ways in which this could be continued